kids rise to the level of expectations. So if the expectation is that there are no boundaries, there are no rules, there's no manners, they can do whatever they want, that's what they're going to do. But if the parents can start instilling some systemic change, then all of a sudden the kids magically change and get all better.
Welcome to the Sandstone Care Podcast, where we help teens, young adults, and their families overcome the challenges that come with substance use, addiction, and mental health conditions. Welcome to the Sandstone Care Podcast. If you have got kids, teens, or young adults, and the boundaries are just not really there, or maybe you tried to set some boundaries and it didn't work out for you, then you are in for an awesome podcast. Today, we have Kevin Peterson. And Kevin Peterson began his journey with recovery in 1991, and he's been sober ever since. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist who opened his own private practice, Peterson Family Counseling, in 2014, and specializes in working with families and individuals struggling with addictions, codependency, and parenting. Kevin is the author of Chronic Hope, Parenting the Addicted Child, and that came out in October 2019, and Chronic Hope, Families and Addiction, that just dropped January of 2021. Kevin, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It's an honor. And this is just what I love talking about this stuff, and I love you guys. So I'm excited.
To solidify just how much we love Kevin Peterson and his book, we actually have it all throughout the Sandstone Care website. And today in the show notes, I'm going to drop a link. And if you're loving the stuff that you hear today, you can get a soft cover copy of that book shipped to your house for free. That's how much we believe in this book and the stuff that Kevin's been saying. So Kevin, again, we appreciate it. Today we're talking about boundaries, right? And so I just want to kind of set the stage. In your experience, what happens when parents don't set boundaries?
Oh boy. It's it can be complete and total chaos. And what I find, what ends up happening, right, is that families that don't have any boundaries, the kids start sort of running the show. And I don't mean like, the inmates are running the asylum type of thing, but that the whole world is revolving around the needs of the kids, and the parents are neglecting themselves, neglecting their marriage, neglecting their jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the phone call I end up getting, like, my 16-year-old is completely out of control. And they almost always say the same thing: I want to bring him to you and you fix him. And I'm like, yeah, I don't do that. What I can do is help you fix the family system. The phrase that I've come up with, my key phrase is, when a company is going broke or struggling, you don't fire the receptionist. You go into the management team and you restructure the way they do business.
Yeah. I've heard it described as like the thermostat, right? Like, as a parent, you can't be the temperature that is just reacting to the environment. You have to be the thermostat, right? Like, you set the temperature. Yep. And when I was a teacher, there was like an old saying: when you first started teaching, if a child was acting up, you do not call the principal or an administrator to come and to escort a kid away or to bring any sort of discipline, because you would instantly lose all credibility. Now, that's not saying that we don't all need help, right? But the point of that is that in order for us to be able to fix things for long-term solutions within relationships with our kids, like, we kind of have to be the initiators of that change. So, when you've got a parent, right, and they've come to you and they said, hey, I want you to fix my kid, can you dive a little bit deeper into why is that not the mindset that works when it comes to trying to set boundaries with your kids?
Oh, absolutely. And I wanted to I also wanted to piggyback onto what you said when you were a teacher. So my first job out of grad school was working for Arapahoe Douglas Mental Health in the crisis response team, which means that kids that were suicidal, homicidal, and psychotic that ended up in the ER, I was the guy that showed up and did the evaluation and then figured out what to do with them. I mean, there was a whole team. It wasn't just me. I'm going to be careful. and But our team's vision, our philosophy was, because the initial response was, well, send them off to a 10-day hospital and then send them back home. And it was repeat customers, because nothing was changing. And so our philosophy was, no, we're not going to send them to the hospital or the psychiatric facility. We're going to send them home, and we're going to follow them home and come in and do family therapy and teach parent coaching. And so that really was where I sort of honed my craft, and that's where I sort of got my vision of, to answer your initial question. I don't think we have to, 14-year-olds are 14-year-olds are 14-year-olds. They're going to do what they do. And one of the things that I truly believe is that kids rise to the level of expectations. So if the expectation is that there are no boundaries, there are no rules, there's no manners, they can do whatever they want, that's what they're going to do. But if the parents can start instilling some systemic change, then all of a sudden the kids magically change and get all better. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I'm being a little facetious, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but yeah, the initial call is, come here. I'm going to drop my kid off at your office like they're bringing a TV back to Costco, and you fix them, and I'll come back and pick up the new version. And I'm like, well, I have a guy in my office that's really good with teenagers. I'm happy to put him with him, but I'd like to sit down and talk to you about what's going on and what's going on in the house and why are these things happening? And, okay, so what you've tried setting boundaries, but they haven't worked. Okay, well, what was the accountability function? And then what were the consequences and the rewards? I'm probably jumping ahead, but it's about, what I found was what works is giving them a plan that they could figure out and that I could coach them through.
Yeah, so I think a good clarifying question is, how does a parent or a loved one who's looking after a teen or a young adult know that they have boundary issues? How do they even know?
Sure. Because it's the house is in a constant state of battle, is the first thing I would tell you, is that it's a fight over getting out of bed. It's a fight over getting to school on time. It's a fight over doing chores. It's a fight over getting homework done. It's a fight over how you're doing in school. It's a fight over drugs and alcohol. And then the sort of the other significant piece is, it's a fight over family behavior. Are there manners and helpfulness and kindness, and I break it into three categories: drugs and alcohol, school or work, and then behavior within the family. And if all, generally they come to me with those three issues. They're getting high and drinking, they're not going to school, or they're doing really poorly in school, and at home they're just a disaster. And it's like, okay, well then let's set up some structure in all three areas.
Right. So, and would you say if there's only issues in one of those domains, then it wouldn't be necessary to like reach out for help? Or is it usually bleeding into each other?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because I actually have I have had families that are like, look, I got to be honest with you. We drug test him and he doesn't have anything, and I'm like, well, that's okay. How's school? Oh, school's terrible. And there's three elements to school, right? There's attendance, there's turning in homework, and then there's actually, your grade that you're getting. And the thing I always say is, we're not going to penalize somebody for having a hard time at school. Maybe they struggle, maybe they have a learning thing, maybe, whatever. Let's get them the appropriate help. That's your job as a parent, is to get your kid the appropriate help and support them in the process. And then, maybe they don't, maybe they're rude at home, maybe they're physically abusive or verbally abusive, or they, don't say please, thank you, or excuse me. And then we sort of just instill that back into the parent and say, okay, so sure, you can reach out for help for those areas. I get that all the time. I will tell you about 90% of the time there is a drug and alcohol function, you know, or a mental health function, you know.
Mm.
So let's include that into the game.
Yeah. So I think when we're talking about boundaries, I think it's also a good idea to have like an understanding of what is healthy boundaries, right? So when we think about healthy parent child boundaries, we understand what it looks like when it's not going well. What does it look like when it is going well?
Oh well, here's here's what the people probably think the answer is. The kid is perfect. They do everything you say on the first time. You don't even have to say anything. They just automatically jump up and do the dishes and clean the house and clean the room and take care of their younger sibling. No, no. They're, kids are kids, and they're always going to be a certain amount of not so much conflict, but part of the function of being that age, is testing the limits, testing the boundaries, and that's how they learn, right? Is figuring out, oh, okay, well, what happens when I do this? Oh, that didn't go well, so it's about having a system in the house that allows everyone to know where the rules are, where and that they're going to be applied consistently, because it turns out that even though kids are constantly testing the boundaries, they're testing them to make sure they're there, because when they know they're there, it makes them feel safe. They know that mom and dad are going to react consistently. They know that there's going to be food on the table. They know that the family's going to do this. They're going to behave this way. That there's going to be this kind of systemic behavior patterns. There's going to be this kind of structure. There's going to, we're going to spend this much time together. A lot of times I get families that are divorced or split up, and one parent is like, well, I apply all the rules, and at the other house it's just party time. And I'm like, yeah, and watch what happens over time. I know initially they're like, oh, I'm going to the party house because it's fun. You know what? That doesn't last very long. They end up coming back to the house that has a system and structure and boundaries and consistency, because it makes them feel safe. They know that they're going to go to bed at a certain time. They know that there's going to be food. They know that the clothes are going to be clean, that the house is going to be clean, that when they need help and emotional support, they're going to get it. That is actually what kids are drawn to. Let's be clear. I don't think any 14-year-old in the morning wakes up and says, oh my gosh, I feel so lucky. My parents are consistent, and there's good boundaries, and I feel safe. And they just know that they like being there.
Yeah, so we can't go around expecting, hey, like, aren't you going to thank me for the boundaries that I've been setting? Don't you feel so safe? No kid is going to say that, right? Like, and
No,
parents, even though they might be intentionally working hard at trying to create an environment that's like that, that's not something that's going to be the case, right?
right.
Especially if it's not something like when you're growing up and you're living your one life, you don't necessarily understand how it is at other places. I mean, unless, like you said, there's kind of a divided household in which there's two different, ways of parenting that are being seen. So, okay, we have a good understanding of what life looks like when we don't have good boundaries. We understand that when there are good boundaries, it's not going to be perfect, but there is going to be an ebb and flow. It's not going to be a constant battle, right? So, when we're talking about trying to figure out how to get boundaries, like how do you set boundaries with teens or young adults? What does this process actually look like?
Okay, so and the three areas that I think families need to focus on with boundaries are drugs and alcohol. And my perspective is no drugs, no alcohol. I break it into three areas and three categories. The boundary is no drugs, no alcohol. The system of accountability is drug testing and breathalyzing, all of which are available on Amazon, and you can just do it. You can do it every day. You can do it consistently. You can do whatever you want. Um, And then structure is the third piece of that boundary, and that is if you pass the tests, the world is yours. If you don't pass the tests, then there's going to be some consequences. And depending on what we're looking at, and if you're testing positive for heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, we're going to call Sandstone immediately. That's not going to be a we're going to work this one out type of thing. Marijuana and alcohol, I'm not in love with the idea, but I'm willing to bet we can probably we can try and set the boundary on that for a while and see what happens. Although I am in favor when it comes to drug testing of actually taking them to a facility, because the facility is going to give you a numerical readout, not just a positive negative, which is critical, right? It tells me how often you're using, how much you're using, and what you're using. And so that's really important. So that's drugs and alcohol. The second area for boundaries is school or work. And if they're in school, their job is to go to school, to do the work, and to do well in school. And I don't mean everybody's got to be a straight A student, but I do think that since that's your primary job as a kid, we want you to do as well as you can do. And so the boundary is go attend, turn in your work, get good grades. And, as long as you're getting all those things accomplished, the accountability is nowadays, all the schools have online function, where you can look at it. And I'm not saying you should monitor it every day. I don't think you should. I think you should monitor it Friday afternoon, open up the portal and see where we are. And it's just black and white. You either did it or you didn't. And I know all the arguments and all the excuses. Oh, the teacher didn't update the work. Oh, well, you know whose problem that is? That's your problem. On Friday, if I were you, I'd be going up to my teacher saying, hey, my parents are going to check the portal today. And if you don't turn in all my stuff or let them know, I'm not going to have any freedom this weekend, and I'm going to lose my phone and access to the car and my social life. Got it? So, you put it back on them and give them the responsibility. And so that's the consequences, right? There's really simple and straightforward consequences. You take away the phone and all electronics. And then the next thing the parents always say is, but I need them to have a phone. No problem. Give them a flip phone. No smartphone, no internet access. Here's the old-fashioned flip phone. Knock yourself out. They won't even take it out of their pocket, and then no car, no social life. But here's the important thing in that situation. We're also not going to get mad. We're not going to use guilt and shame. We're not going to belittle anybody. It's not going to be punitive. It's like, oh, well, you made a choice not to do your work. Therefore, you're choosing not to have any free time or have internet access. I'm going to respect your choices. I'm not going to come down on you like the Grinch that stole Christmas. I'm just going to respect your choices. And, the same thing with the last one, which is behavior at home. Simple, straightforward. So I always tell them, just pick 5 things. Speak nicely to everybody, no physical violence, no breaking stuff. Do your chores on time, and please, thank you, or follow a curfew, and please, thank you, and excuse me. And I always say Friday evening or Saturday morning, have a little group meeting and review those 3 categories and see how they go. And they either did it or they didn't. And if they didn't, it's like, okay, well, cool, we'll revisit this next week. But in the interim, here's what's going to happen. The idea of grounding people for life, or it just doesn't work. It has to be connected to the actions in the situation. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And at the same time, I have so many clarifying questions that I want to know.
Sorry, I was going on there.
No, I love it. So first off, let's talk about, I want to kind of talk, you mentioned grounding, right? So are you saying that we shouldn't be grounding our kids when they're not meeting the boundaries that we're setting up?
Well, what I'm saying is you have to make the consequences enforceable and realistic, right? So, when we say, when I was a kid, when you got grounded, what that meant was you couldn't leave the house, and I think in this day and age, I don't know many families where both people don't work, or it's like, oh, okay, so who's going to be the sheriff and monitor this person? You know, or they may have a job, or they may be involved in extracurricular stuff or sports or whatever. So I just tell them, so if you, so let's say so they're not doing well at school or they're skipping classes. Okay, cool, no problem. Here's the consequences. Um, I'm going to take away your phone. I'm going to give you a flip phone, and I'm going to take away your access to the car, and I'm not going to be driving you anywhere. And if you and I have a list of chores that I need done around the house. I always tell parents, look at it this way: you just got a personal assistant for the day. Tell me what you need done, and let them know. But again, the most important thing is not to come at them with this overbearing, finger pointing, shaming, punitive, guilt ridden, I can't believe you did this, what the hell's wrong with you? That's got to go. It's just got to be black and white. Oh, well, okay, you chose to do this, therefore it means you're choosing not to do this. That's cool. I'm going to respect your choices.
That's the second time you really made a distinction on regulating how you are communicating to your child in this situation, right? And I'm wondering if you can kind of just dive into that a little bit deeper. Why is it so important for you to not let your emotions kind of get the better of you when you're divvying out these consequences?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. Because I know it's hard, right? Because you're angry, or and let's be honest, anger is truly fear, right? I'm afraid that this is what's going to happen. Your behavior is going to manifest this way, and you're going to end up living in a van down by the river, right? you and 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 I get that as a parent. I understand that. And so, what we want to be able to do is going back to that analogy, right? Of, when a business is having problems, you don't fire the receptionist, you retrain the managers. It's the same thing. The parents, the leaders, they set the tone for the system and the family, right? That if mom and dad are, or mom and mom, or dad and dad, or whatever, if the parents are highly volatile and emotional and overbearing, what they're showing and modeling to the kids is, this is how you handle situations, this is how you behave. Let me again, don't expect the parents to be robots. People, everybody has feelings, everybody has emotions, everybody's got stuff. And so, what I always say, number one is, the parents should be working on their stuff individually, their own emotional stuff and their own mental health stuff, so that they can present back to the family and say, hey, I get it, and I'm trying to work on my stuff, and set that example that the whole family needs to do that. And there's also an element of vulnerability and saying it's okay to realize that you're making mistakes and that you need help. But I'm the parent and I have responsibilities. I worked, for the county basically, and the rules are, as a parent, I'm responsible for feeding you, clothing you, sheltering you, educating you, and making sure you are physically safe from harm. Those are my jobs, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure those things are accomplished. And I'm going to do that with love. I'm going to make mistakes. And that's okay. It's okay if you make mistakes. It's okay if I make mistakes. But at the end of the day, I'm responsible for you. Therefore, I'm going to lay down sort of the expectations of what I think the family system should look like. Did I answer the question? I kind of feel like you asked these great questions, and I could just go all day.
No, I feel like you did. And I think one of the synonyms that I think you're kind of revealing as we're talking about this is boundaries are clarity, right? You talked about boundaries in like, hey, here are the 5 things around the house that determine whether or not you're kind of living up to your end of the bargain as a teen or a young adult in this house, right? Here are the 5 consequences that come as a result from not doing what you're supposed to do in school. And when you're able to say those things ahead of time, when you're able to clearly communicate them, then you don't have to be so reactionary. And I feel like a lot of what we do as parents and really in relationships is so reactionary because there was never any clarity there to begin with, right? So can you speak a little bit more as to why clarity is so important when it comes to boundaries?
Absolutely. The thing I was thinking of when you were saying that, and I think this is the important thing to remember is that, well, there's a couple of important things to remember. Um, Kids are kids. They're not 40. They haven't been through life. They haven't seen what you've seen. They haven't done what you've done. They haven't experienced what you've experienced. And it's not because they're stupid. It's not because they're being rude. I mean, sometimes they are. They're just kids. They don't they don't have that ability to grasp and hold things and contain things and remember things because their minds are just going a million miles an hour, and they're hitting puberty, and there's hormones, and there's all sorts of stuff going on. One of the things we always say is that the brain isn't fully developed for men until they're like 27 or 30, and women it's about 25. So expecting a 14-year-old to behave like a 40-year-old is unrealistic, right? And the other thing I always tell parents is, just be patient, just tell them what's going on, but don't get involved in this process that I see so often with families. Is like, well, I tried to explain it to him why we have to do it this way. I'm like, yeah, how'd that work out? And it's like I was talking to a wall. I'm like, yeah, so don't bother. You're the commander. You're the captain of the ship. If you want to explain it to him like, hey, I'm going to say no drugs and alcohol because I'm worried about this, this, and this, but don't get into a debate about that. And the same thing with school. I tried to explain to them why grades are so important and how it affects their future, and they just it's like they're not even listening, or they just want to argue everything. And I'm like, it's perfectly okay for you to explain it to them once, but that's it. We're done. I'm not going to waste a lot of time trying to convince you. I don't need your vote. I this is a benevolent dictatorship. I'm the parent. I love you. I absolutely love you, and the answer is no. And I'm not going to explain again why. I'm just telling you the answer is no. And the same thing with the behavior in the family is like, these are the expectations. We can have a family meeting about what are valid expectations, and that's fine, and everyone can give their opinion, but at the end of the day, I'm responsible for you, so this is how I'm going to present things. And don't fall into the trap of getting into debates with kids. It's great to hear what I'm not saying you should just carry a big stick and be like, I have spoken, whack. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying don't get into the long-term debate. It's like, well, I hear what you're saying, but my time is up and I'm not changing my mind, so we're moving on. Does that make sense?
Totally. So when I was in the classroom, something I learned really quickly is that you cannot motivate someone. You can't control the way someone feels,
Nope.
right? You can't control any human being, not really. Um, you can talk to people, you can set expectations, you can say how you feel, but the only thing that you can control is yourself, right? And I took this really hard as a teacher, especially, if you care. The more you care, the easier it is for you to get worked up and to just really let your emotions show. And it's because you care, right? But the what I had to like separate was the things that were within my control and the things that were not within my control. And it's so hard sometimes when you're dealing with young people, like teens or young adults, to see them fail, right? Or to see them mess up or to see them struggle. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of speak to that. I know that I read your book, and it wasn't like a straight and narrow path for you, right? Like there was a lot of struggle within that. And there was a point in which your parents were pretty much like, hey, like we're not going to enable you throughout this process. So can you speak to parents on, how do I help, like, how do I not cave, or how do I not enable them further in their journey when I see them struggling and failing?
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is one of the things that we tend to talk about. And I'll tell you, I'm glad you brought up my personal experiences because um, what happened my freshman year of high school, man, I was off the deep end. I was partying and not going to school and just being a knucklehead. And I got caught because 14-year-olds are just geniuses at that sort of thing. You know, the school called my house and they were like, "So, were you guys on vacation last week?" And they're like, "No, why?" Because Kevin didn't go to school at all. We just thought you were in Hawaii or something. And my parents, kind of sat down and lit me up a little bit, and I could tell my dad realized he wasn't getting through to me. And he finally looked at me and he's like, "Look, I need you to understand something. If you don't do well in school at this point in your life, it's going to really severely limit your choices." And this is the part that really caught me. He goes, "And you're going to end up going to junior college and living at home." And I was like, "What?" So I suddenly, decided to be a good student. But I had to meet my own consequences. And I had to face my own consequences to get my motivation. And this is the thing I tell parents with their kids, because I get this all the time. I can see what they're doing and I know what's going to happen. And I'm like, right. But every time you step in and prevent them from feeling their consequences, you're enabling their behavior. The most important thing that can happen to them is that they face their consequences and start to feel that pain a little bit, because that will motivate their change of behavior. Nothing motivates behavior, or like you were talking about, more than having done it wrong and realizing what happens when you do it wrong. There's the old analogy, right? A young man goes up to the wise old man and says, "Wise old man, how did you become so successful?" And the wise old man thinks about it and he says, "Well, I make really good decisions." And the young man says, "Well, how do you know how to make good decisions?" And the old man says, "You make a lot of bad decisions." And you have to learn from that. You have to have that opportunity to learn from that. And then of course immediately the family was like, but they could go to prison, or they could they could overdose and kill themselves. I'm like, okay, well, that's why we instill the other process, so that we're putting speed bumps in drugs and alcohol, school, and behavior at home, so that we aren't going from 0 to 100 overnight. We're catching the fact that they're consistently using drugs. Oh, okay, that's a problem. And if we can't get that rectified, we have to go to a higher level of care. Same thing with school, same thing with behavior at home. We're not just acting like I have no idea what happened. We know it's coming. But allowing them to feel the pain of their consequences, or to feel the struggle of their actions, that's what motivates them changing their behavior, not you telling them to do it differently.
Yeah, I was only formally in therapy for a really short period of time in my life. Um, our listeners know that I grew up kind of in what people would say is like a broken home. Like both of my parents are addicts. I was adopted by two different families throughout middle school and high school.
Huh.
When you were talking about skipping school, I immediately thought of, the second family that I lived with throughout high school. Obviously, I was making a lot of bad decisions. And so when they had to go out of town for a funeral, they had me stay with another family, right? And so, of course, it was my idea to go back to the house and to throw a party at the house that I knew was empty. And the neighbors saw this thing, and they told the family, and the family comes back from a funeral, and they're like, "Are you like really like what else can you do? Like, we're trying to give you grace, we're trying to like help you out here, and when we go out of town for a funeral, you throw this house party, right?"
Yeah.
And I say all this to say that, I spent a lot of my life thinking about why I did the things that I did. And I would blame, how I grew up. I would blame my parents. I would blame the chaotic environment, right? Like not learning things at a young age, not having structure, not having stability. And this really carried on with me throughout high school and into college, right?
Yeah.
So, substance use, cheating on girls, like I was engaged and then I cheated on the girl, right? And so I went to a therapist, and the therapist asked me, he's like, why are you, why do you do this? Why do you like do all these things that like mess up your life? And I was like, well, I was drunk, or, my parents. And he goes, no, do you remember what you did? And I was like, yeah, I remember what I did. He's like, okay, so it's not like you were too drunk, right? Like, um, and and I was like, but my parents. He's like, well, did anyone have a gun to your head? And I was like, no, no one had a gun to my head. He's like, so that's not it either. He's like, so why do you do the things that you're doing that hurt you? Right. And I'm like, oh, God is punishing me. And he's
Oh,
like, no, no, no. Why do you do the? And he kept drilling in this point until it was, you do these things because you want to. And for me, I know that sounds like a really simple thing,
mhm.
but bad things are happening because I'm wanting to do these bad consequences are happening because I'm wanting to do these bad things. And in the consequences of those situations are things that happen when you do bad stuff, right? And if you don't take the time to feel those things, then you're not going to have the opportunity to learn from them, which is a really hard lesson. And I think that, I probably learned it way later in life, and it would have been better if I would have learned it, earlier. But that was my own case, right? Like I had to go through that experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like we have a lot in common. And but no, man, I mean, it's the same thing, right? I mean, I honestly, every therapist I ever had would be like, "Hey, I think we need to talk about your drinking," and I'm like, "Well, this is going to be our last session," because I know what the deal is. I'm not. I mean, I mean, again, 30 years sober and in recovery. Uh, Alcoholics and addicts know they have a problem. That's not the issue. They're just not willing to give up the lifestyle for whatever reason. And that's a whole nother podcast. But the way here's the example. What happened to me, as you read in my book, is when I was 26. I was in a 4-hour car ride with my dad, and the first 5 minutes went like this: Kevin, you're my only son, and I love you, and I don't believe a word out of your mouth. You're a liar, a cheat, and a thief, and a drug addict, and an alcoholic, and you're out of the family. And until that stuff changes, we're going to hold that boundary. And I'd heard this before, and I was like, oh, yeah, sure, tough guy. And they stuck to their guns, and they got my attention. And I want to be clear, every single person I know that has long-term recovery has exactly the same story. When the people around me held their ground and held their boundaries and said, we're no longer part of this circus. You are welcome to continue, but you're going to do it without us. That's when they started paying attention and started listening. And I think it's the same thing when you're parenting a child. Someone under 18 is holding them accountable for their actions with love and compassion, and saying, if I'm as when you're under 18, obviously the parents have a little bit more authority. You can say, well, I noticed you're not changing your behavior, so we're going to get you help. It's not an option, you're getting help. Over 18, it's like, well, here's the deal, we love you, we will get you help, but if you choose not to take the help, then we're going to choose to put up some really big boundaries and keep you on the outside. We love you. We're not saying, it's not that old tough love, throw them out and good luck. It's no, we love you, but until you choose to get sober, you're choosing not to be part of the family.
Yeah, so I want to dive into that distinction because I think that some of our listeners have a teen, who's
Sorry. Yeah.
struggling with mental health and substance use. But then some of our listeners, it's a young adult. They're still living at the house, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
boundaries haven't been set, and they might feel like, man, it's too late. There's no way I can kind of make this thing now. So let's start with, we kind of touched on what it's like for a teen, but if you have a young adult who's living in your home, or even if they're not living in your home, and they're struggling with substance abuse, how do you set those boundaries? How do you show them that kind of love by having those clear boundaries?
It's by sitting them down and saying, "Hey, we're gonna do what I call Plan A." And Plan A is, here are the boundaries: drugs and alcohol. If you're living in our house, or even if you're not living in our house, if you want our support, we got to know that you're clean. Like, no drugs, no alcohol. We got to know that you're self-supporting either through work or school. And if you're going to school and we're paying for it, or if you're receiving any support from us, we need to see some accountability and some transparency. And then the last piece is the same thing: the behavior within the structure of the family. And say, you're 21, you're in college, or you're living or doing whatever, but your behavior is very disrespectful and inconsistent. So we need to see all those things change, and we will help you figure that out. Do you need therapy? Do you need tutoring? Do you need to go to treatment? We will help you with all that. We're not going to just throw you onto the street and say good luck. We will help support you, but we're also going to respect your choices. So if you're going to choose not to take the help, we're going to choose to put up a really big boundary. I just had this conversation with a family who has a 28-year-old in the house, who suffers more from mental health and addiction. And I said, yeah, but it's the same thing. You can get him help. And instead, he's choosing not to take the help. And then you're allowing him to continue to disrupt the family. So what you can say is, we're going to respect your choice. We'll help you get help, but if you choose against the help, you're going to have to find another place to live. You're not going to use our car. You're going to have to get your own phone plan. You're going to have to start behaving like an adult. So that's when somebody's 18 or over or whatever. And then under, it's simpler. Well, we've tried the boundaries, accountability, and structure in the three categories, and it hasn't worked. So we're going to go to a higher level of care because we're your parents and we have that authority.
Mm. Yeah, and you opened up kind of a new dimension when I'm thinking about this. Oftentimes when people are dealing with substance abuse, there's what's called a co-occurring disorder, or right, there's also some mental health issues that they're trying to work through, right? And so we in our minds we really separate these things, right? We say, okay, substance abuse is really different than the mental health challenges, but can you explain a little bit deeper when you're dealing with one more than the other? Like, you talked about how they're similar. Can you kind of explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Because I get that's something I get all the time. Oh, well, he really doesn't have a substance abuse problem. It's more anxiety or depression or bipolar or ADHD or whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool, no problem. However, can we agree that we have to eliminate the drugs and the alcohol in order for us to treat the mental health? And we can do them at the same time. Don't get me wrong, but you can't treat somebody's mental health diagnosis while they're drinking and getting high. They don't go together. It's like it's like I go to the gym every day and I work out and I run. I mean, I eat at McDonald's 5 times a day. and I drink as much, full sugared sodas as I can get my hands on, and I just can't seem to lose weight or get healthier. It's like, well, okay, sure. I think it's great that you're going to the gym on the regular basis, but you got to take a look at the big picture, not just the one element. So, you know, when somebody has struggles with substance abuse and mental health, and I don't know if we have time to talk about trauma, but boy, there's another topic for another podcast. But you know, there's a lot of chicken and the egg argument over mental health and substance abuse, and I don't even go there. I'm not interested. What I know is I see people that have mental health issues or trauma or whatever that either turn to drugs and alcohol and then can't turn out. We call those people alcoholics and addicts by virtue of the fact that they can't disengage. That's not the entire population. It's a percentage of the population. Generally, about 10 to 15% of the population can't control or disengage from drugs and alcohol, regardless of their mental health or trauma situation. So, those folks need help with the substance abuse and the trauma and the mental health issues. There are plenty of people that have mental health and trauma issues that don't turn to substance abuse. But they also need help as well. And there's plenty of great facilities that'll do straight trauma and mental health issues as well. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, yeah. So, if I'm thinking about somebody who's maybe they're not struggling with substance use at all, right? Like maybe that's not the issue for them, but they definitely have patterns of thinking that are harming them, that are making them make bad decisions, right? Um, and so would the protocol for that be any different than it would be with, someone who's an addict? Because the drug testing element is not there. What's the mechanism used to be able to measure whether or not they're kind of living up to their boundaries if you're not drug testing them?
That's a great question. And what I say is that when you have a situation where someone's struggling with more mental health issues and maybe some trauma issues, we want to get them help from therapy and psychiatry potentially, and whatever that looks like, whether it's individual therapy, group therapy, inpatient treatment, psychiatric help. And so what we're going to do, what I always tell people to do is we're going to, if you're funding it and you're paying for it, and you're the one, sort of overseeing everything, you want to get the providers a release of information that allows them to communicate with you only on the level of, yes, the client is attending, nothing else.
Mm.
That's the accountability. Okay. I don't want the families to know what the person is talking to the therapist about or the psychiatrist about. That's none of their business, and I'm big on that. I think, there has to be that division. But we have to know that they're actually going and participating, because that's how we can measure whether or not there's change in the behavior and having success, or they need more support.
Okay, got it. So if I'm hearing you correctly, one of the ways to hold someone who's struggling with substance abuse accountable is through drug testing, right? And it's just a way that you can kind of measure and validate. It's objective, right? It's not something that's based on circumstance, like, oh, I think you were partying last night. And then when it comes to mental health, if it's primarily a mental health related thing, are you actually attending your sessions? You don't have to tell me what you're talking about. You don't need to tell me, I don't need to know if you're opening up, right? Like, I don't need to know if you're processing through the trauma. Like, let me respect that boundary from you, but I do need to know that you're showing up, right?
And participating. And if you're showing up and participating and it's not helping, that tells us that we need to do something different.
Mm. Yeah,
Not
so it's
just
about love,
Yeah,
right? It's like,
absolutely. This is about coming at it from a perspective of love and empathy, and I will provide you all the support you need, but you have to engage in it.
mm,
And if you don't, then we got to talk about that. Then we got to talk about why aren't you, you're not getting any better, but you're also not participating in the support process. So what's going on and why? Let's have that conversation, as opposed to what the hell is wrong with you? Why are you doing this? I spend all this money. Why aren't you not I mean, I don't know about you, but I heard it all, and then eventually my parents just got to the point where they're like, you know what? We love you, but we can't do this anymore.
Mm.
And if you want help, we will move mountains for you, but until you pick up the ball and start handling it, we're out.
Yeah. I want to call out the elephant in the room, so to speak, when it comes to drug testing.
Yeah.
There's probably some loved ones listening to this or watching this, right? And they're thinking drug testing is an invasion of privacy, and it's something that's going to break trust, and there's no way that this can be a healthy way for me to interact with my child, right?
Yeah.
So what do you tell parents who are considering whether or not drug testing is the right thing as a mechanism for accountability with their teen or young adult?
Well, I mean, I understand. And when people come to me, they're actually kind of past that point. They're like, "Hey, something's wrong." And so I here, let me sort of, if I can, sort of maybe rephrase, how do you know whether it's experimentation or true substance abuse, right? And I mean, where are we at? And because if somebody's experimenting, do you got to come down on them with weekly drug testing? Well, it depends. I mean, if they gotten in trouble, or you're finding drugs and alcohol in the house, I think it's a very black and white way to solve the problem, because somebody that doesn't have a problem with substances is going to be like, "Whoops, my bad," and you're not going to you're going to drug test them for a couple of weeks, and it's going to be zeros, and it's going to be the end of the conversation, But somebody that's really has struggling and really caught, is sort of has enacted their own addiction stuff and sort of kicked it into gear, um, you could be saving their lives. And that's the thing I always try to tell people is, one of the things that people in my industry, in my business, and yours, people that work in the addiction business, our clients die. It's not, oh, they're in a depression and they called in sick today and they're watching Oprah or whatever. It's, if I don't do something, they could die, and I have to step into that. I have to tell you that one of the things that really frustrates me is watching our society and how we interact. Like, sort of, well, it's not my place to say anything, or I don't want to hurt their feelings, or I don't want to step on their toes. And here's the thing I always say is, hurting their feelings and stepping over the line and stepping on their toes may be the thing that saves their life. And so for that segment of the population, I think it's okay. I think it's okay to step over the line and hurt somebody's feelings and tell them, you know what, I love you, and I think you have a problem, and I want to help you. And if their response is, get the hell away from me, I don't want to talk to you, that's okay too. But you've spoken your truth. And I think that's critical. Now, if it's your kid and they're under 18, you literally could just be saving their lives. And if it turns out they don't, or it turns out that they're self-medicating, you're going to find out that they need help through support, through therapy, or through something else. I mean, you want to pick up on the signs. You want to see what the evidence is and say, hey, I noticed that you're showing up late. You're not getting up in the morning. You smell like alcohol. You smell like pot. I've noticed some pills are missing. And don't be that family that's like, well, we kind of saw some stuff, but we didn't say anything. Because those
Yeah.
families, bad things happen.
Yeah. And, for listeners or watchers, if you're not sure, like, if there's a problem, I'm going to drop a link in the show notes in the description box. It's a 5 question questionnaire. It's a quiz that you can take for your teen or young adult to see if there might be a problem that you need some support with,
Yep.
right? And it talks about, changes within school or mood or behavior or sleep, right? Like we're looking for these kind of changes to be able to get at the root of that problem. So if that's helpful for you, I'm going to drop that in the show notes below. And I know that our listeners are also going to, have a question. I, you know, okay, you mentioned maybe it's experimenting. I do it for a couple of weeks. I drug test for a couple of weeks and then stuff is okay. Like there's zeros, like you said. But if I can tell that there's a problem, how long do I keep drug testing? Especially if I've got a 16-year-old, right? Like they're going to be with me for another 2 years, right? If they stay for college, it could be longer. Like, how long do I keep this up? What's the frequency look like? Is this just like an everyday thing, like, or every week, every month? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, yeah. And now we're back to what in the book I call Plan A. If it's marijuana and alcohol, I say let's give it 30 days to see if they can sort of right the ship and turn things around. Because that's generally about the amount of time that if you suspect somebody's using drugs or marijuana, alcohol, then it's okay. We're going to drug test you. And the way I always say is that do it Monday to catch the weekend. Do it Friday. And it's easy. It's straightforward. And if you feel like you're getting hoodwinked by the kid, which it happens, take them to a facility and get a hair follicle test. It's you can't you can't cheat the hair follicle test. Um, and I would say try it for 4 weeks and see what happens. And you can always, the other thing too is that you can just say, hey, every Monday we're going to take you to the facility and get you drug tested, and then have a couple of urine tests in the house and just randomly say, you know what, you looked a little funny yesterday. It's always first thing in the morning, always first thing in the morning. Hey, I need you to fill up this cup, and go to the bathroom with them, and just be like, hey, I just need you to fill this up. And it's, oh, I can't, I don't have to pee. First of all, everybody has to pee when they wake up. Second of all, oh, okay, cool. Well, we'll just wait. Here, would you like some water? We'll just hang out and wait. And they'll fill it up, and and again, if it tests positive, don't get mad. It's information. What they're telling you is, I know there's consequences. I know that things, but I can't stop. Okay, that tells me that you need help. So we're going to get you help. It's just information. And that's the most important thing.
Have you seen, when parents do this and they're like, hey, good morning, pee in this cup for me, that the kid's just like, I'm just going to let you know right now, I'm going to fail this thing. Does that happen?
Yeah, sure, all the time. And I tell them pee in it anyway. Because it's going to test anywhere from 8 to 16 items. I want to see all the items. And so it's like, that's okay. I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate you telling me the truth, but go ahead and pee in it. Again, it's about the consistency. It's about the family system being consistent. The analogy I use in the book is that if there's a speed trap at the end of your street and the cop's there shooting his radar gun, and you drive by at 100 miles an hour and he's just like, hey, have a nice day. What that tells you is, yeah, they're going to drug test me, but they're really not going to drug test me. They're not going to do anything, And so even if he's like, yeah, I know, I smoked pot. It's like, that's okay. But, go ahead and pee in the cup and let's just take a look at it, and we'll use it as information and we'll go from there. Yeah.
Wow. I feel like I've just learned so much about this. It's so interesting because I've been talking with so many experts and doctors and psychotherapists and therapists and counselors. Like I've been learning from so many people, and I think okay, I'm starting to get a grasp on this. And then I have a conversation like this, and I realize, oh my God, there's so much that I didn't know, and there's so many other ways that we can work and like get support. Like there's similarities, there's themes, but I never thought about using drug tests within the home, like, and even the practical measures of how that works, and how, what's the difference if somebody's primarily mental health compared to addiction or substance use. And it's starting to help me to understand, like, yeah, and that's what families and parents go through all the time, is that this is a journey and you're constantly going to be learning, even as your child, as your teen or young adult is learning. So Kevin, thank you so much. And where can people go to learn more about you and your practice and your books?
Sure. So my website is www.chronichope.us. We have a podcast, we have YouTube channel, we have a Facebook group, the Chronic Hope Institute, and then we have a Facebook page. We do all that stuff, and we're constantly updating with information. We have the 2 books that are available on Amazon Kindle and Audible. And we welcome people's comments and questions and inquiries. And I created the Chronic Hope Institute last year. It has 2 goals. One is to educate families that are struggling with addiction and codependency, and then the other goal is to educate professionals about addiction and codependency, and sort of clean up the misinformation and the misunderstanding about things. And I was born and raised in a house of addiction. My mom was a prescription drug addict. I grew up in Palo Alto, California. I grew up in a big, beautiful home, and I had a lot of the accoutrements of being well off. And on the outside, everything was beautiful. On the inside, it was a mess, And then around 13, I started drinking and using, and I was like, whoo-hoo, where has this been? Became, I believe genetically I'm predisposed. So I was an alcoholic and an addict. I got sober at 27. And then I went back and got a master's in marriage and family therapy, and graduated in 2011 from Regis. So I feel like I'm uniquely qualified to talk about what it's like to be the family member, what it's like to be the addict, what it's like to be sober, and what it's like to be the mental health professional. So I love people asking questions, and I hope we can do this again, because I got lots more.
There is no doubt in my mind we'll have you back on the show. And also, just remember, guys and ladies and human beings out there, that we're going to put a link in the show notes that you can fill out a quick form. You're just going to put your address and your name. We'll ship you the book, like the physical copy of the book. We love his book so much, we just buy them and we give them to people because it's helpful. And it's just a great guide. It's like almost like a checklist. It's got really great bullet points at the end of the chapters that you can just for clear takeaways, right? Things that you can put into action this week with your family, right? So make sure that you do that. Again, Kevin, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And listeners, remember, change is possible, and we'll see you on the next episode. If you want to learn more about treatment options for you, your teen, or young adult, then tell us about your situation on a confidential call using the number in the show notes, or live chat with us at sandstonecare.com. We'll connect you with the treatment that you need, and if we're not the right fit, we'll get you where you need to go. Be well, and remember that change is possible.